No Connor Bedard and now no Frankie Nazar. Sure seems like the tank is back on in Chicago.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcasting network. We're proud to bring you your team every day. I'm Jack Bushman, your host. On today's episode, I'll open things up with Frankie Nazar being the latest key member of the Blackhawks to suffer an injury, and what life without Connor Bedard and now Nazar as well is going to look like for the Blackhawks moving forward. And then for segment 3, I'll also discuss Arvid Soderblom struggles continuing and whether the Blackhawks should consider making a change with their backup goaltender. But first, do have to let you all know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go and download the FanDuel app right now to place your live NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, happy Monday, Blackhawks fans. Hope everyone out there enjoyed that epic comeback win for the ages from the Chicago Bears on Saturday night, beating the rival Green Bay Packers and getting a little bit of revenge after losing at Lambeau Field a couple of weeks ago. Caleb Williams to Jade Walker on 4th and goal, the onside kick before it, and then Caleb again throwing a dime in overtime to DJ Moore for the game winner. My goodness, was that one sweet. And then, of course, the Bears also clinched a playoff spot yesterday, baby, getting a little bit of help from Aaron Rodgers, of all people, in the process. But the reason I say I hope everyone enjoyed that sweet win from the Bears on Saturday night is because undoubtedly life is about to get a whole lot worse for all of us Blackhawks fans. Already without Connor Bedard for the rest of 2025 and probably for a week or two in January of 2026. Well, early in Saturday's 6-4 loss to the Ottawa Senators, which I actually thought the Blackhawks showed some resiliency for the first time in a while and also scored more than 2 goals for the first time since Connor Bedard got injured. But early on in the game, yet another brutal blow for the Blackhawks as Frankie Nazar takes a puck right to the face while skating out in front of his own net. I actually thought he handled it pretty well, which gave me some hopes that he'd be able to brush it off and return to the game a little bit later. But not only was that not the case, as Nazar was ruled out for the remainder of the game during the first intermission, but to make matters worse, during his post-game media availability, head coach Jeff Blashill announced that Nazar will also be out for an extended period, likely somewhere in the ballpark of 4 weeks. So, yeah, from bad to worse, Blackhawks fans, probably not going to have Nazar for at least the first 2 to 3 weeks in January, as well as obviously the final 4 games here of 2025. He's, of course, been filling in for Bedard as the team's top line center iceman ever since 98 got banged up in St. Louis a couple of Fridays ago. He also plays in all situations for the Hawks, even more so without Bedard, right? 5-on-5, power play, penalty kill. And despite not finding the back of the net for nearly 2 months there, he's still 4th on the team in scoring this season, 2nd on the team in assists. And to now be down the top 2 centers, the top 2 most exciting players on the team, and the top 2 playmakers, I mean, it's just an absolutely devastating loss for the Blackhawks. And it's like, what did we do to deserve this, right? Because finally, for the first time since 2020, the Blackhawks are actually playing an exciting brand of hockey and are actually watchable on a nightly basis. But then in less than 2 weeks' time, both Bedard and Nazar go down, and neither are like minimal day-to-day injuries. No, both are going to be out of the lineup for an extended period of time. And that's just absolutely crushing for the Blackhawks because while things, yes, have been going sideways for the last 3 weeks now, really ever since right before Thanksgiving, that blown 2-0 lead against the Seattle Kraken on home ice, Connor Bedard not getting that penalty call on a breakaway in the final moments of the third period, really have changed the tides of the season for Chicago. But what's really frustrating to me is, well, if you're someone who tuned into all of my deep dive episodes going through the Blackhawks stats and analytics, then you know the Hawks were overachieving a little bit and probably were due to have some regression considering what their underlying stats and analytics kind of looked like. So Yes, it has been disappointing to see this team come back down to earth a little bit, but what's really frustrating to me is that now, without Bedard and Nazar, it's just going to be nearly impossible for this Hawks to kind of salvage what's happened these last couple of weeks and save the season, really. It feels like it's going to be nearly impossible for them to go and get back into playoff contention when Bedard and Nazar are going to be out of the lineup for an extended period, because the offense is just going to be stretched so thin. There's not nearly as much speed or creativity without Connor Bedard and without Frank Nazar. And I actually give the Blackhawks credit. Despite losing Nazar early in that game on Saturday, they scored 4 goals in a game for the first time since I believe it was November 30th in that 5-3 win against the Anaheim Ducks. Good to see Ilya Mikheyev snap his 20-game goal drought, scoring for the first time since November 7th, I believe it was. He was responsible for 2 of the Blackhawks' 4 goals on Saturday. Andrei Burakovsky, who's definitely going to have to step up even more so now that Nazar is also injured. He scored for just the second time here in December. And then I also definitely got to mention the kid, Nick Lardis, scoring his first NHL goal to give the Hawks a little bit of late life there in the third period after a dreadful start to that final frame. But I was really impressed that Lardis, despite being thrown down onto the fourth line for the first time up in the NHL, which I think if you ask any Blackhawks fan, it feels like a little bit of malpractice there. I have been outspoken about wanting to split up the kid line because I really didn't think it was working with Lardis, Ryan Green, and Oliver Moore. But to change it up and go and throw Lardis down on the fourth line, even before Nazar got hurt, I mean, just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. He only played 8 minutes and 17 seconds on Saturday, but still wound up scoring his first NHL goal, showing off some of those skills that we saw during his time where he was lighting it up with the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL, finishing off a nice spinning backhander for his first NHL tuck, which also, comes in Ottawa, Ontario. Lardis is an Ontario native, played in the OHL for his entire junior career. And he also mentioned after the game that his dad had made the trip to Canadian Tire Center to watch that game. So pretty cool that Nick Lardis got to score his first NHL tuck in front of his dad in his home province. Unfortunately, the Blackhawks weren't able to score again after that point in time and ended up losing 6-4 to the Sens. That's now 5 consecutive losses for them. But we got to see some of the promise from Nick Lardis that, we're anxiously awaiting to see if his game is going to be translatable in the NHL. I sure believe that it can based on what we've seen through his first 4 games now, but he's definitely going to be leaned on a lot more now that the Hawks are also down Frankie Nazar on top of Connor Bedard. It's not going to be fourth line Nick Lardis for probably any more games moving forward because of those latest injuries. And speaking of the Blackhawks forward lines without Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar, that's what I'm going to get into here in just a moment, Blackhawks fans. Make sure to stick with me as I'll dive into what things look like at practice here at Fifth Third Arena as the Hawks returned from their 3-game Canadian road trip. But first, I do got to give a shout out to one of today's sponsors here on Locked On Blackhawks, which is Game Time. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets, that can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is go and cheer on your team. But that's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for buying NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. So go and take the guesswork out of buying your NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and then use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, and you'll also get $20 off on your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off on your first purchase with Game Time. As always, real quick before I get into segment 2, just a quick reminder to please go smash that like button and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. If you enjoy what you're watching here today, got a goal of 3,000 subscribers, well past 2,000 at this point in time, thanks to all the great support from you out there. But if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure to go and do so. Help me reach 3,000 subscribers before 2025 comes to a close. It's 100% free. It will not cost you anything and really does help me out in a massive way. Segment 2. It's now no longer just life without Connor Bedard. It's life without Bedard and Nazar. And if you thought it was tough to watch this Blackhawks team without just Bedard, it's definitely not going to get any better. It is going to be a tough brand of hockey from the Blackhawks moving forward. And without those two guys for an extended stretch, definitely wanted to go through how the Blackhawks handled their forward lines here at practice today, which, by the way, Jeff Blashill wasn't in attendance for today's practice. He unfortunately had to go to a funeral. So assistant coach Mike Vellucci was the one running the show. He was the one who spoke with the media afterwards. So kind of got to take what he said with a grain of salt a little bit there, as well as these forward line combinations, because also, while Blashill wasn't in attendance, neither was Teuvo Teravainen, who briefly also left Saturday's game against the Senators due to a skate injury. Went on to have a brutal turnover in that game later on after returning. Matt Grzelcyk also, by the way, was banged up against the Senators as well. Fortunately, both he and Teuvo Teravainen were able to return to that game to not give the Blackhawks any more further injuries to have to deal with. But I was really curious to see how the coaching staff in general was going to handle these forward lines now that Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar are out for an extended stretch. Serving as the top line here today, again, a reminder, though, Teuvo Teravainen was not in attendance. He had a maintenance day, should be good to go to play tomorrow against the Philadelphia Flyers. Final game for the Blackhawks before Christmas, by the way, 8 p.m. Central Time tomorrow night at the UC. Thanks a lot, TNT. Really appreciate getting out of the United Center at 1 a.m. tomorrow night. But the top line for the Blackhawks here today, now without Nazar and without Bedard as well, was Tyler Bertuzzi, Ryan Green, and Andre Burakovsky. And we're really going to see how tough life is for the Blackhawks to create offensively now that they are down Bedard and Nazar, because looking at their four center icemen here today, Ryan Green, Ryan Donato, Jason Dickinson, and Dominic Toninato. First off, for Ryan Green, I've given him props all season long, but stepping into the top line center role when he doesn't have Connor Bedard next to him is definitely not the ideal situation for the Blackhawks there. And while Green has shown off better offensive skills as a rookie than I think most of us anticipated, definitely not set up to thrive as a top line center, as a guy who doesn't play with a ton of speed, moves pretty well out there, but also doesn't have a ton of playmaking abilities. And that's kind of the same thing, obviously, with Tyler Bertuzzi there, right? And I don't think it's a surprise that we've seen Bertuzzi quiet down a little bit since Connor Bedard got injured, because he's the net front presence finisher type of guy, and Bedard was setting him up for a lot of those greasy goals that he was scoring. And I've talked about how Bert, even when he was thriving with Bedard, he's not much of a playmaker. He doesn't play with a ton of speed out there. So he and Ryan Green together, well, I do understand that thought process. It's just still definitely not as lethal of a combination as it would even be there with Frankie Nazar, because he can just do so more with his wheels and has better creative offensive instincts than someone like Ryan Green. Andre Burakovsky, maybe out of anyone in the Blackhawks forward group, he might have to step up the most over these next couple of weeks without 98 and 91, because while we haven't seen a ton of, we haven't seen a ton of shoot first mentality from Burakovsky this year. That's definitely going to have to change, as well as the Blackhawks offense as a whole, as a team that's not going to be able to create as much when they do get opportunities or even do get a chance in the offensive zone to put the puck on net. They're going to have to do that more so. Andre Burakovsky is someone who's always been known as more of a goal scorer than a playmaker throughout his NHL career. He's definitely going to have to be rifling the puck more frequently, and he's also going to have to be someone who's going to have to show an uptick in his playmaking as well, which he really hasn't done a ton of this year either. But as one of the few guys now in this forward group who does have decent offensive abilities and can actually move, like, we're going to need the puck on Andre Burakovsky's stick more frequently in transition, and he's just simply going to have to be better for the Blackhawks to do anything offensively. But Bertuzzi and Burakovsky, at least as of the lines here today, again, without Teuvo Teravainen, that was the Blackhawks top line with Ryan Green down the middle. The second line was Oliver Moore on the left wing, Nick Lardis on the right wing, and then Ryan Donato down the middle. And this Ryan Donato playing center is something the Blackhawks, I think, probably should have gone to a little bit sooner, or had Donato play a center ice role in the top six a little bit sooner. It's something that I've been calling for on the show here. He's been down on the fourth line mostly for the last month now, and I don't think as a surprise has been much quieter ever since he had that great stretch there in October where I think he scored 6 goals in 5 games. He was red hot there for a little bit, but it's time to give him a greater opportunity in the lineup as someone who is a veteran who has been capable of moving up and down the lineup throughout his career and obviously did a lot of good things, albeit alongside Connor Bedard last year en route to a career year. We're just going to have to ask Ryan Donato to do more. And I'm honestly surprised he didn't get bumped up to that second line center spot a little bit earlier, considering the lack of offense the Hawks were getting without Bedard up until Saturday's game. I think Nick Lardis in the top 6 is an absolute no-brainer. He has to be on the first line or he has to be on the second line. Can not play on the fourth line. It was unacceptable on Saturday. It would be even more unacceptable to put Nick Lardis down in the bottom 6 without those two guys. He's like Andre Burakovsky, but obviously in a different sense, one of the few guys now on this roster who actually can move and get the finished product. Oliver Moore, we see it from him at times, and I think it's fine to put his wheels up in that top 6 spot right now, along with Nicky Lardis, and hopefully try to get them to create something on the outside with their chemistry and with their playmaking, while Ryan Donato, in a similar fashion to kind of Tyler Bertuzzi, can go to the net front area, while he's also a guy who is willing to put the puck on net whenever he gets an opportunity. That's something I really like about Ryan Donato's game. So I do understand going with Oliver Moore, Nick Lardis, and Ryan Donato there as the second line. And quite honestly, while Teuvo Teravainen wasn't participating in practice today, I've had enough of Teuvo Teravainen, man. And I think a lot of Blackhawks fans are starting to get there too with what I've seen on social media in the last couple of weeks. And it's funny because I feel like, not to toot my own horn, but I was really the first one who was really knocking on Teuvo for his style of play, not being aggressive whenever the puck on his stick, passing up on primetime shooting opportunities, making poor turnovers, just not playing like the veteran we need him to be, especially without Connor Bedard and now Frankie Nazar as well. I was saying I'd give Teravainen an opportunity in the top 6 prior to Nazar going down. I think he might still have to do it just because of his playmaking, but if he doesn't start shooting the puck with a purpose, I don't care who the Blackhawks are down. Jeff Blashill might have to scratch him to send a message because straight up, Teuvo Teravainen has not been good enough for months now. It's completely unacceptable, and it feels like it's getting worse with each passing game. And it should be the opposite. The Blackhawks need more of him without these guys, and still being so passive out there, passing up great scoring opportunities. Had that dreadful turnover on Saturday that led to, it was Tim Stützle scoring a breakaway goal on Arvid Soderblom. And it's like, goodness, man, we just cannot have these type of things happen from one of the few experienced veterans on this roster. So I'm very interested to see what Blashill is going to do with Teuvo Teravainen for tomorrow, whether he's going to replace Oliver Moore on that second line, or maybe he goes and steps in on the third line where he's kind of been the last couple of weeks, along with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev. What is interesting, though, Blackhawks fans, is Captain Nick Foligno, who did travel with the Hawks for their 3-game road trip up in Canada. They were hopeful that he was going to play at some point during the trip, but considering, as I broke down on the show, during the last practice at Fifth Third Arena before the Hawks flew out to Toronto to kick off the road trip, Foligno still wasn't even able to shoot the puck at that point in time, so kind of made it hard for me to believe that he was going to be healthy enough in just, 3 or 4 days down the road to go and suit up in an NHL game. He did participate, though, fully in practice with the Blackhawks here today. That's the first time he's done that since suffering that not broken hand. Well, I'm assuming it was something broken in his hand, considering he was out for 4 weeks. That occurred on November 15th against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he was given around a month timeline to be out of the lineup. That is very fitting for him now to be close to his return. No official confirmation from Mike Vellucci one way or the other if Foligno is going to draw back into the lineup officially tomorrow. If he doesn't, I'm guessing Teuvo Teravainen is going to go on this third line with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev. I'd probably just leave Oliver Moore along with Nick Lardis and Ryan Donato because while it's, tough to get consistent finishing abilities from Oliver Moore, he still puts himself in the right spots, and at least he's willing to shoot the puck where Teuvo Teravainen isn't. That's been very frustrating. if Nick Foligno does wind up playing tomorrow, Blackhawks fans, I think it'll probably come down on the fourth line, which today during practice, that was Colton Dach, Dominic Toninato, and Sam Lafferty. If Foligno is healthy enough to go, he'll probably go down on that fourth line along with Toninato and Dach, if I had to guess, likely leaving Sam Lafferty as the healthy scratch. But just taking a look at this Blackhawks, forward group as a whole now without Connor Bedard and Nazar, I mean, it's pretty clear they don't have a lot of speed and they don't have a lot of playmaking. Looking at this lineup, I mean, Lardis can move, Moore can move, Burakovsky can move, Teravainen can kind of move, Mikheyev can kind of move, but out of those guys who can move, who really can do things with the puck and make things happen at least on a consistent basis? Not very many of them. So as I talked about in segment 1, this offense is just going to be stretched so thin without those two moving forward. The Hawks are going to need Nick Lardis to step up. The training wheels, it's time for them to come off, and it's time for him to be shooting. I mean, every time he touches the puck in the offensive zone with the way that the kid can rifle it, the Hawks cannot afford to pass up scoring chances moving forward. They've already had enough offensive struggles since Connor Bedard got injured. It's not going to get any easier with Frank Nazar joining him out of the lineup. But with the 5-game losing streak, Blackhawks fans, and with a 3-11-2 record in 16 games since November 20th, it has just been pitiful lately. The Hawks are now dead last in the NHL with a .457 points percentage following this weekend. They're also tied for the fewest points in the NHL with the Seattle Kraken at just 32. In a matter of just a couple of weeks, it's gone from potential playoff contenders, hearing Bedard and Nazar talk about how they want to win right here, right now. It's kind of been brushed to the side now as the Blackhawks are back at the bottom of the NHL standings, which I really didn't think they were, with the way that things were unfolding through those first, 2 months, first month and a half. I didn't think we were going to see the Blackhawks here again this season, but the offensive output dipped even prior to Bedard and Nazar getting injured, and now those two are out. It's really putting the Hawks in between a rock and a hard place, and it's really unfortunate. This is the way that the season has suddenly transpired, right? Because I thought we were going to see a lot more competitive hockey, and while it was nice to see it for a month and a half, it's pretty crummy that that's what it's being cut down to. On the bright side, we at least got to see the light at the end of the tunnel that Kyle Davidson has been building for a couple of years. And it's undeniable that the Blackhawks are on the right track. And considering the amount of draft capital that they still possess, they're going to be adding even more talent to their prospect pool in 2026. And as a result of this pitiful stretch, which has led the Hawks to being back down at the bottom of the NHL standings, tied for the worst team in the league with the Seattle Kraken. I know this isn't what all of you fans want to hear because we've been rebuilding for so long and we've been at the bottom of the standings so consistently year after year. And we've been adding high draft picks to the prospect pool for years and years and years. But on the bright side, the Blackhawks will have an opportunity to add another special player to their prospect pool if things continue how we kind of expect them to without 98 and 91. It's going to put the Blackhawks probably in a real good spot as we roll into the new year in terms of the 2026 NHL draft, which is a very talented draft. If the Blackhawks can come away with another special player, probably on the offensive side of things, which it really feels like that's what they're missing. Although, to be fair, we haven't exactly seen Anton Frondell yet in the NHL. Same with Roman Kanserov. We're just starting to see what Nicky Lardis has in store. It's tough to exactly assess what the Blackhawks are still missing in their rebuild, but it does feel like they're still missing a key running mate with Connor Bedard. And if they can go and get a pretty darn good one, maybe even Gavin McKenna, if he still winds up being the number 1 overall pick. Again, I know this isn't the conversation we wanted to be involved in with the way things were starting out the season, Blackhawks fans, but it wouldn't be the end of the world or the worst thing ever for the Hawks to go and have another top pick in 2026 and add another potential superstar to this organization. But that's kind of, where it feels like the Blackhawks are at now after suffering these 2 key injuries. As I said off the jump, it kind of feels like the tank is back on here in Chicago, which sucks. And it's not going to be fun watching this Blackhawks team most nights without those two moving forward here for the rest of 2025. And early on into 2026, but hopefully those two guys can just get healthy as soon as possible and rejoin the Hawks lineup as soon as possible, because when those two are playing, we know what this Blackhawks team is capable of. And without those two, we sadly do as well, considering they've lost 5 consecutive games, have yet to win since Connor Bedard got injured in St. Louis. All right, there are my thoughts on kind of the tank returning to Chicago with the latest injury updates. Coming up in just a moment here, Hawks fans, before I close things out, still want to discuss whether the Hawks should consider switching things up with their backup goaltender. But first, I got to talk to you all about another one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. And that's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets right as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, and every highlight moment. And live betting is best when the game starts to shift. When a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips right after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump right into the moment so that you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked in on every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, go and visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, segment 3, just a couple of days ago on the show, when discussing Laurent Brossoit clearing waivers and returning to the Rockford Ice Hogs of the AHL, something that, many Blackhawks fans have kind of said on social media or down below in my comment section recently is, why not give Laurent Brossoit a chance at the backup spot, especially with Soderblom's struggles here over the last couple of months. And I talked about that a little bit briefly a few days ago, but I wanted to go into it a little bit further today because actually Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times recently sat down with general manager Kyle Davidson to discuss this very matter. And then, of course, Soderblom went on to allow another 6 goals on Saturday in Ottawa, and he's now given up 29 goals total in his last 5 starts. That has him now to 3-7-1 on the season, with a 4.04 goals against average and 873 save percentage in 11 starts. He also has a minus 8.8 goals saved above expected number. I know it's not all his fault, and I know in a couple of those on the back end of back-to-backs in general, whether front end or back end, have not been good for the Blackhawks this year, but particularly that 9-3 loss against the Buffalo Sabres, where Soderblom, had it not have been a back end of a back-to-back and the Hawks playing 2 days later, they probably would have pulled him and put Spencer Knight in there to at least not have his numbers look as shoddy. And then, of course, he was also on the wrong end of that 7-1 beatdown against the Anaheim Ducks, where he actually made a career-high 46 saves in the process. So I don't want to, throw this all on Soderblom, because undoubtedly there have been times where he's played in the Blackhawks. I think their worst games of the season have come with Arvid Soderblom in between the pipes. But I also do think when you compare how Spencer Knight has been able to bail the Blackhawks out, and obviously Spencer Knight is a much higher quality goaltender than Arvid Soderblom. I'm not breaking news here, but I'm just saying the disparity between those two and what can happen for the Blackhawks, what can go wrong for the Blackhawks when Spencer Knight's in net compared to when Arvid Soderblom's in net. When Arvid's in there, things can absolutely unravel. Whereas whenever Spencer's in between the pipes, it still feels like, worst case situation, he's given up 4 or 5 goals, really. And those nights have been few and far between. And just comparing Spencer Knight's numbers on the year, the 2.57 goals against, 914 save percentage. Again, I know he's been one of the best goaltenders in the entire NHL this year, but the number that really stands out to me is 11.2 goals saved above expected. Well, Arvid Soderblom has negative 8.8 goals saved above expected. That's a 20-goal difference right there, and Arvid Soderblom has only played in 11 games this season. So it's like, at what point do the Blackhawks recognize, and I do want to say this is a little bit unfair, because Soderblom, through his first 5 starts of the season, 6 starts of the season, looked like the same goaltender that he did in the first half of 2024-25 before the Four Nations face-off. And I think it's pretty clear for how long he's been at the professional level now with Chicago that he's likely always going to be an inconsistent goaltender. But I do want to say, to be fair, when he is playing his best hockey. He does look capable of playing at this level. I mean, we saw it against the Detroit Red Wings in November when he had that awesome 41 save performance against his brother to help the Blackhawks beat Detroit. But it's too few and far between, and the lack of consistency that we're still seeing from him now at 26 years old when he's played in the NHL for parts of 4 or 5 seasons now. It's just like, at what point do the Blackhawks really recognize that he's just not going to be a guy here? And I know that's a little bit unfair to say based on his last 5 starts, but it's also like, it makes me come back to why I was upset about the Hawks giving him a 2-year contract extension in the offseason, especially when you do have Drew Commesso waiting in the wings, who was a goaltender that I've always been high on since the Blackhawks selected him in the second round of the 2020 draft. And now you also have Laurent Brossoit just kind of waiting in limbo until the Blackhawks go and trade him. I just wonder if they consider bringing Laurent Brossoit up to the NHL as a proven 1A, 2B goaltender in this league to kind of go and stabilize some things, while also potentially giving Arvid Soderblom the opportunity to reset. However, Kyle Davidson, when speaking with Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times recently, said basically the opposite. He said, quote, "We know Arvid is a really good goalie. He has shown that over a period of time. There's no real discussion at this point to make any change. We just have to be a little bit more consistent in front of him," close quote. That first line, even as someone who's defended Arvid Soderblom more times than not, I don't know how that can be an absolute truth. We know Arvid is a really good goalie. Do you? Do you, though? You know he can be a good goalie at times. Has he shown that he can be a good goalie consistently through even more than a month or two? I don't believe that whatsoever. And it is a little frustrating to me that Davidson isn't at least giving this some thought whatsoever, or doesn't seem to be. And while Arvid Soderblom would have to clear waivers in order to get sent down to Rockford, with a 4.04 goals against an 873 save percentage. And it's not like those are outlier numbers. Like those have been pretty close to Arvid Soderblom's career statistics at this point. And yes, I know it's been on a bad Blackhawks team. Mostly it hasn't done him any favors, but would another NHL group really consider claiming Soderblom, especially when, if they were to claim him, he would have to remain on their NHL roster for another 30 days or else being put through waivers again? I don't know. I don't think another team would claim him. And if that is the case, why not give Laurent Brossoit an opportunity to showcase what he can do in the NHL? Maybe help find him a new destination, which is what the Blackhawks ultimately want to do. Why not consider calling up Drew Commesso, who, despite having a 6-9-2 record in Rockford this year, has a 2.62 goals against, 914 save percentage, continues to get better with each passing year. I know he's still young for a goaltender, but he'll turn 24 years old this summer. It just feels like now the time is now to give Commesso that opportunity, and we're blocking him from getting that opportunity because we decided to give Arvid Soderblom a 2-year contract extension in the offseason, which I thought absolutely was the wrong decision. That's a little bit frustrating to me because I think it's pretty clear. Yes, Soderblom has games where he can be an NHL goaltender. Is he one consistently? I don't think so, man. I really don't think so, unless it's one heck of a defensive group out in front of him. Just the disparity between he and Spencer Knight this year, especially in the last month, it's ridiculous. Night and day, and the Blackhawks don't have a chance, seemingly, when Arvid Soderblom is out there, because he's given up 4 or 5 every single time right now. And as I mentioned in segment 1, the Hawks have only scored 4 goals in a game twice in their last 16 since November 20th. So puts them in a real tough situation. I'm a little bit surprised. I guess, Kyle Davidson isn't going to come out and talk bad, I guess I should say, about any of his players, but I would be surprised if the Blackhawks, if things continue to go this way for Soderblom, if they'll continue to just hang him out to dry as the backup and just hope the defense in front of him gets a little bit better, even though that's the same defense that Spencer Knight gets pretty regularly from the Blackhawks, and he's still been one of the best goaltenders in the league. And I'm not expecting Arvid Soderblom to be one of the best goalies in this league. I'm just expecting him to not have a 4.04 goals against average and a 870 save percentage for the 4th time in as many years. It was time for him to finally show some progress this year, and we got it a little bit early, and he's reverted very far back to his old self in these last couple of weeks. And if that continues, I'm very interested to see if the Hawks consider giving Brossoit an opportunity if they're not able to trade him, or if they consider giving Drew Commesso a real look as the backup, which I feel like he's deserved that opportunity for how well he's developed in Rockford. we'll see what winds up happening there, but definitely something to keep an eye on over these next couple of weeks as Arvid Soderblom's struggles continue in net for the Blackhawks. All right, that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes as soon as they become available. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You want to check me out on X, you can do so at Jack Bushman2. My Strictly Blackhawks account can be found at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.